Welcome today to the Healing Our Sight podcast. I have as my guest Patricia Lemer. She is the author of Outsmarting Autism and also has her own podcast, The Autism Detective. Those of you who follow me will remember that, or notice even that the last episode that I posted was our conversation. And I'm delighted to welcome you to my podcast today, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Denise. This is exciting for me to get the information out to your audience.
Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be an authority on autism?
Sure. I'm a licensed professional counselor, which is sort of like a social worker. In the state of Pennsylvania, where I live, I had to jump through some hoops to get licensed. And I practiced most of my career in the state of Maryland, in the Washington, D.C. area. And I moved from working in the late 1960s with kids with all types of disabilities and accidents, kids with cerebral palsy and genetic syndromes like Downs. And then in the 70s, I moved to learning disabilities, and I was part of writing the law, which mandated states to provide special education for kids with all kinds of disabilities. And in the 80s, I worked with kids with attention deficit disorder as well as learning disabilities. And at the end of the 80s, early the 90s, autism raised its ugly head, and we started seeing kids with more serious issues. And doctors were surprised, and those of us who had been in the trenches for a long time said, well, these kids are similar to those earlier kids, but they're just sicker, and they've got more serious problems. And I had been working with a multidisciplinary team, occupational therapists, optometrists, speech language pathologists. And in about 93, we started a nonprofit called Developmental Delay Resources,
Mhm.
known as DDR. And 93 was really the beginning of an internet. And so it was a really amazing time where people stopped communicating by telephone and letters that they put stamps on. And we started emailing each other, and it made our world bigger, as you know,
Right.
because we could reach beyond our geographical area. And so DDR was a wonderful nonprofit for about 20 years. And we put on one of the first conferences on autism. We had a quarterly newsletter. We published an annual directory of practitioners all over the world. And we really connected people and helped them prioritize their therapies for their kids. And in about 2013, after running it for about 20 years, I merged it into another newer nonprofit called Epidemic Answers, and I retired.
Okay.
And I was the chairman of the board of Epidemic Answers and helped them grow and expand and mature. And and since then, my book came out in 2014, the first edition of Outsmarting Autism, and then I revised it 5 years later, so the new expanded version, which had 4 additional chapters, as well as an expansion on subjects and updated references. And it's a 600-page tome that I don't think too many people read from cover to cover, but I'm grateful for a marvelous index, which helps you look up just about anything you want. And it's a wonderful reference book through the lifespan.
Mm.
And we worked hard on the subtitle, which is Building Healthy Foundations for Communication, Socialization, and Behavior at All Ages. And that really in a nutshell describes the book. That it's what are the foundations that make you a well-functioning person, whether you're a toddler or a teen or a young adult.
Right. Yeah, it is an amazing course. I highly recommend that people take a look at that for sure. I noticed that when your book was published, and I think that it's actually the updated version, that 1 in 59 children in the United States is now considered to be on the autism spectrum. Has that changed since 2017?
Yes, it's almost doubled, so that we're now looking in one in about 30 kids, depending on what state you're talking about and whether you're talking about boys, girls, what age.
Wow. We're talking serious epidemic here then.
We're talking a serious epidemic that has basically been ignored by the medical professions and the CDC and the FDA and the American Academy of Pediatrics say, oh, we're just more aware. And we have raised awareness and we those people were always here and we've changed the diagnostic criteria and so we've included more kids. We no longer call kids retarded. That's a word we don't use anymore. And
Hmm.
so they're under the same umbrella as autism. But even if that were true, and it isn't, the you can't ignore that the numbers have changed. And 1 out of 6 kids has a diagnosis of something, whether it's asthma or allergies or a learning disability or autism. 1 out of 6 kids is sick, and we can correlate the fact that they're medically ill with some kind of medical condition with the fact that their behavior's disturbed, their learning's disturbed, their social language skills are disturbed and delayed. And so something's going on.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that you address in your book as well, right?
Right up front.
Hmm.
Yeah. How did we get here?
Exactly. And
And the
and how
world
can we get out of it too, I think is also the
exactly.
point, right?
Yeah. I mean, the world has really changed. I just turned 78 years old and we our growing up was so different than my granddaughter's growing up and um the children today. We played outside, our mothers cooked, we walked to school, we walked home for lunch, we walked back to school, we played on a playground. There weren't the concerns for safety that there are today.
Mhm.
We I live in Pittsburgh, so we're the home of Dr. Salk, who invented the polio vaccine. We were guinea pigs. I was a guinea pig for the Salk vaccine in kindergarten. Dr. Salk was a friend of my family's,
Mm,
and that was one of the few shots that we got.
yeah.
And kids are getting far more shots. They're getting lots and lots of antibiotics, which have saved so many lives, yet are known to wreak havoc with the microbiome in the gut. And
Right.
so much is different than it was when we were growing up. And some of those differences, of course, are wonderful that we can communicate, you and I, now on video. And I remember our Dick Tracy watches, which was like a fantasy that we could look at our watch and see who we were talking to. And now it's a reality.
Right.
And how amazing is that? I wasn't allowed to make a long distance phone call before 5 o'clock because it was too expensive.
Yes, I remember those days too. Definitely aging myself when I say that. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. And as we're talking about vision, I noticed a disturbing statistic when I was looking at Melvin Kaplan's book, or it's probably in your book as well. You mentioned that about half of autistic children have some sort of strabismus.
yeah. So a strabismus is a turned eye,
Mhm.
and the eye might turn in, it might turn out, up or down. It might be a consistent strabismus. It might be both eyes. It might be alternating eyes. But strabismus basically means a turned eye. And I'm sure your listeners are familiar with that. Did you experience that yourself, or
Yes.
members of your
Yes.
family did? So your brain had to compensate for that turn, and um, that's disruptive to memory. It's disruptive to attention. It's disruptive to thinking. And a strabismus is some kind of developmental abnormality for which your brain learns how to compensate.
Right.
So you became a well functioning person. You knew what you had difficulty with. You learned how to compensate. And some brains compensate better than others.
Mhm.
It and you know that when you're tired, perhaps it's harder to compensate. When
Yeah.
you've eaten something that isn't agreeing with you, it's harder to compensate.
Mhm.
And I call these load factors. And in my book, I talk about total load theory. Why do so many kids have issues today? There's more load factors out there. Our world wasn't so toxic. Our world didn't have so many choices, so many obstacles to learning and behaving as it does now. And
Yeah.
so, yes, a strabismus is very common in kids with autism. Some kids compensate just fine, and
Mhm.
some kids don't. But the truth of the matter is that with the strabismus, the eyes don't work consistently and efficiently together.
Right.
So when you don't have binocular vision and the eyes working together, you don't have depth perception. And again, people can compensate for lack of depth perception. You learn how not to bump into things. You even learn how to drive. And still, it's hard. And if you had good depth perception, if we could get those eyes working together consistently and efficiently, then you would have an easier time.
Right. Well, and in the regular population, the percentage is like 5%.
Right,
So having it be 50% makes me ask the question, okay, which came first, the strabismus that caused the autistic tendencies, or the autism is reflected in the fact that that's just another thing that's not integrated in the
right,
body?
right. It's a very good question. And the strabismus, I think, is a result of some of these other load factors, whether it be medical interventions or lack of movement opportunities or toxins in the environment. We have no idea. In every child is a different fingerprint. They say
Hmm.
when you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. They all are a little bit different.
Right.
And so it's hard to know which came first, the chicken or the egg. And what we see are that some of these symptoms that are associated with autism, such as flapping or
Mm-hmm.
stimming, are in fact compensatory techniques that the body uses to jumpstart vision, to accelerate vision, to normalize vision. And instead, they're interpreted as socially unacceptable stims or behaviors, and we try to extinguish them.
Yeah.
And that infuriates me because
Yeah.
I think trying to extinguish those compensatory symptoms can be abusive. And these children and adults are trying to cooperate. They're trying to compensate, and you're taking away their stims, and
Mhm.
that's just mean and unjust.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think about how it might be related to Tourette's as well. I mean, is that kind of
Absolutely.
on the spectrum?
Absolutely. I don't think people would put Tourette's on the spectrum, but there are a lot of similarities
Mhm.
among Tourette's behaviors and autistic behaviors, and some kids even have dual diagnoses.
Okay.
And Tourette's is more and more being recognized as an allergic reaction,
Mm.
whether it's to something they're in the air that they're breathing or something in the food that they're eating. And Tourette's is like an allergy gone berserk. It's attacked the nervous system so that it's out of control.
Yeah. There's so much going on with all of that. It's
There
it's a
sure is.
big topic. Um,
Yeah.
let's say someone that has a child on the autism spectrum wants to know whether this is something that they need to look into. What would be those symptoms that they would look for or signals that their child has that kind of a vision issue?
Good question. I First of all, I think any child with an autism diagnosis, no matter what symptoms a parent is seeing, should have a complete developmental vision exam. And we can talk about what that includes.
Hmm.
But most of these kids have a, a good number of symptoms that we ascribe to autism, like stims, like a sideward flicking of fingers, or a lack of eye contact, good, consistent eye contact, or looking at the floor, or even covering the eyes and the ears. And those are obvious ones, losing their place when they read, having poor motor coordination, eye-hand coordination, not being able to hit a ball or any kind of a target with a bean bag, being poor at sports, stumbling on the stairs, having trouble uh, when the surface changes. Like I've seen a YouTube video where a toddler, like a 2-year-old, comes to a crack in the sidewalk and gets down on her hands and knees and crawls over the crack and then stands up again.
Yeah.
That child's brain is giving her a message it's not safe. So even something such as shyness, fear of the environment, of a new person, is your visual system telling your brain this isn't safe.
Mhm.
Something's wrong. Anxiety. This is all, these all could possibly have a visual basis to them.
Okay. That's a lot.
It's a lot. So
Yeah.
it's really anything that resulted in an autism diagnosis. And children with an autism diagnosis need to see a special kind of optometrist, a developmental optometrist who has special training beyond can you see at the distance.
Mhm.
And these are kids that need to have someone watch them play, look at their posture, watch how they use their eyes and their hands together,
Mhm.
how what their posturing of their hands, of their head. Is there a head tilt? Um, I often ask parents to show me a picture of their children, and I would see a head tilt. And I'd say, well, what's that about? And oh, he always kind of tilts his head to look at something. Your head should be even with the horizon. You
Right.
you you don't want to see a tilted head.
Right. Well, and a lot of these symptoms are going to apply to children, whether they're considered autistic or not considered autistic,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so they're going to go in and have a complete eye exam with a developmental optometrist, right? Um, how would that look different for an autistic child versus, one that doesn't have those challenges?
Great question. So, um, an optometrist, any eye doctor, has a standard procedure that they want you to look at the chart and tell you, you know, read the letters. Well, that may be too difficult for most of our kids. And,
Yeah.
and then they have pictures. What is that a picture of? Is it a cat or is it a dog? Some of our kids are nonverbal.
Hmm.
They can't look at the picture and tell you what it is. So you could say point to. And some of them don't even have the visual skills to focus on something long enough to point and the ability to isolate a finger with the ability to point.
Hmm.
So sometimes, if the child can't comply to a more formal exam, then you want to just watch the child play. And our best optometrists are great observers, and they will give children items that are appealing. And they could put them right in front of them. They could ask their mom to hand them to them. They could um, put them in the distance and ring a bell or something to attract their attention. And then they'll watch. How do they get to the object? Do they reach for it? Do they wait till they're on top of it? Um, Watching posture, watching eye hand coordination, watching play may be the best we can do with a child who's not going to be compliant to the demands of a formal exam.
Hmm. Well, and some of the instruments that they use are able to gauge what an appropriate prescription might be that would help them to
It
organize
it
that.
could, but there's some children who can't even tolerate an instrument near their face,
Hmm.
and those instruments are going to look at a possible prescription, but they're also going to look at what that prescription might do to help them. But it also, you can look at the change of breathing, the change of posture when an optometrist puts a certain lens in front of the eye. And what a lens does is it bends light. And so it sends a different message to the brain. And if the brain gets a different message than it's used to getting, you may see the head tilt go away. You may see the breathing change. You may see the child sit up straighter. All kinds of different things could happen if when you put a different lens in front of a child. And developmental optometrists use lenses therapeutically as well um, as crutches. I'm wearing glasses. I've worn glasses since I was 6 years old. I didn't know I needed glasses. Nobody knew because I was nearsighted. But that's different than vision, which is how the brain is interpreting what the message the eyes are seeing.
Yeah.
And under that term vision, we include all kinds of things as perception and eye-hand coordination, and we're interested in all those pieces that the eye doctor's going to look at.
Right. Right. And in my case, I had the strabismus as well as the nearsightedness going on.
The acuity problems and the eye turn, and that makes you
Mhm.
really complicated.
Right.
And a traditional approach to did you have surgery? You didn't have surgery, did you, as a child?
I did not have surgery as a child. No.
So some of these kids have had strabismus surgery,
Mm.
and they're still candidates to be worked with, but this isn't a muscle problem. This is a eye coordination problem. So if you've cut the muscle, um, you certainly can work with the child, but it's a little harder.
Right. Well, and for me, I wasn't able to align my eyes and keep them aligned, and so the surgery was helpful for that. And I think it's just again a case by case basis, what's going to
It
work
absolutely
best for you.
is. Everyone's different.
Yeah. So in vision therapy, there's also a movement component also
There
going
sure
on, right?
is.
And that they're going to work with the child in movement as they do the therapy. Um, are there some other things that you coordinate with that as you've worked with people and seen what kinds of things are helping?
There's a sensory motor hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
that um, Gazelle, the child developmental specialist, Swiss specialist years ago, developed of the hierarchy of how vision plays out with the motor. And it's fascinating. And I love talking about the visual motor hierarchy because in the first months of life, babies are just motor. They're learning to use their bodies and their muscles, and their eyes go along for the ride. When they move somewhere, their eyes, being part of their body, move with them. But the body is driving, the motor is driving the eyes. At
Right.
some point, the eyes become the boss of the motor. And so instead of a baby moving from point A to point B and then the eyes see where it is, like um, a child in a nursery school where he would walk into the room aimlessly and wander through and get to the Lego corner and wow, here's the Legos. I love Legos. I'm going to play. A child at the that's a motor visual child. A child at the visual motor level would walk into a room, take a count of what's in the room, see the Legos over in the corner, and his brain would say, "Whoa, there's my friend the Legos," and his body would take him there.
Yeah.
That's that's a higher level of functioning where the vision drives the motor. And that's the third level. And the fourth level is where your vision works without moving. So
Mm.
that's what you and I are doing, sitting here in a chair, making pictures in our mind's eye of what our mouth and our words are saying. And that's what's required to organize your life, to know what's in your backpack, to think about planning dinner. You know, you're doing that all in your mind's eye. And that's why our kids have such a hard time as they get older if their visual skills haven't matured because they still need prompts. They still need somebody to say, "Did you get your backpack? What do you know what you have on your calendar for tomorrow? Oh no, I need to look.
Mhm.
Um, what time is it? Are you running late? Oh my God, I forgot to look at my watch. What? Oh my goodness, it's 2 o'clock. I need to be at my um, spelling lesson. So it's it. You want to have a calendar and a watch in your mind's eye so that you can keep track.
Yeah.
And that's higher level visual thinking. And vision is the highest sense that in the hierarchy. And it's built on touch, movement, proprioception, which is the muscle and joint sense, and the vestibular system, which is your balance sense, which is located in your inner ear. And so an occupational therapist would work with kids on the autism spectrum on building that sensory motor foundation for using your visual system as your primary sense.
Mhm.
And so all the life's experiences that we have in 3 dimensions, moving through space, touching objects, not bumping into people, playing ball, playing with anything that you and I did as a child, those are really different experiences than kids have in two dimensions today when they play games and video games on a computer or
Mhm.
on their phone. And
Right.
we want kids to have those three-dimensional sensory experiences. We want them to swing on swings, walk on balance beams, fall off, get back up, go ice skating. And some of those experiences have been taken away because they're not safe.
I
In
was
the
gonna say
I
that. The
Yeah,
playground that I played on as a child was a lot more, quote, unquote, "dangerous"
yeah.
than what the kids have now.
Today's playgrounds, they've taken away those experiences.
Mhm.
And, kids aren't getting hurt anymore. It's it's crazy. Kids need to get hurt. They need to fall and pick themselves up and brush themselves off and feel they're gonna be okay.
Yeah, I agree. Although I think I got hurt way more than I needed to.
Yeah, your visual system didn't protect you. It
Right,
it was dysfunctional, and you did your best not to get hurt, but you kept getting in trouble because you weren't getting efficient information.
right, right. So do you see a lot of people when they're looking for therapy doing occupational as well as vision therapy? Because you mentioned
Absolutely.
that that's kind of working
Yeah,
together.
and they do work together. Usually, an OT precedes the optometrist
Mm,
because the OT can work on the vestibular system and the sensory motor system. And then there's reflex integration. And working on reflex integration can occur in either an OT's office or in an optometrist's office. It's a tool in a tool chest of both professions. It's
mhm,
also being used sometimes by speech language pathologists. And the speech language pathologist and the OT are a good team. And they can work together by swinging a child in a swing while you talk to him, because that sort of turns on the on button for talking by stimulating the vestibular system.
mm,
So I write about all of that in my book. The reflexes have their own chapter. The
mhm.
sensory system has its own chapter, and vision has its own chapter.
Right. I noticed it has a very extensive chapter. I love that. Um, can you address a little bit about the relationship between vision and the social skills and how integrating the vision is helpful for that part of the challenges that they're facing?
That's another really good question. When you think about how two people relate, body language is super important.
Mhm,
And the nonverbal part of social skills is really important. When you're a 3-year-old, how do you know it's your turn?
mhm.
You watch, and
Right.
you watch and you wait for a break, and then you know it's your turn. And it starts when a teacher says, "Johnny, now it's your turn." And you learn what to look for and how to give meaning to what you see. That's what vision is, giving meaning to what you see. And
Mhm.
so you go from taking turns to, oh my God, she's mad at me. How do I know she's mad at me? Well, that one eyebrow went up. That's giving meaning to nonverbal communication.
Mhm,
And so many of our individuals with autism don't know how, A, to look at and focus on nonverbal behaviors, and B, give meaning to them that helps them act appropriately. They
mhm,
drone on and on and on and on about certain subjects while the other person's rolling their eyes and saying, "When is he going to stop?"
Mm.
And he doesn't realize he's been talking too long.
Yeah.
So lots of subtle social behaviors are founded in interpreting the nonverbal behaviors, which is a visual skill.
Mhm. Does that get addressed in vision therapy?
Rarely.
Yeah, that's what I
It,
was thinking. Because
I don't
there's that
think so.
relationship there, but that doesn't mean that the autistic kids are gonna develop the ability to read the cues, right?
No. And in it's done in counseling and
Mhm,
psychotherapy where they often use pictures. What emotion is this picture showing?
mhm,
And this picture's angry, this picture's happy, this picture's impatient. And I don't like pictures. I like people. It
yeah,
has to be real. It has to be a real experience for a kid who who's somebody says to them, "You just interrupted me. I was in the middle of a sentence and you just interrupted me." That
mhm,
kid's going to remember that.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious about how, autism is related to ADHD and the relationship between vision in that whole mix too, because I feel like a lot of times kids are misdiagnosed and maybe they're even told they're on the autism spectrum and they're not, or they're told they have ADHD. And in both cases, it could be maybe a vision problem instead.
You're really asking all the right questions. Thank you. The I put ADHD at the mild end of the autism spectrum. Not everybody does that, but
Mm,
I do. And I think the characteristics are the same. The
mm,
root causes are the same. Kids with ADHD also have significant vision problems, but not to the level that kids with autism do. And they tend to be socially a little more acceptable, and their attention problems are often visual, but they also are often like kids at the further end, maybe related to some foods they ate or something in the air during allergy season. They may be more squirmy and than they usually are. But if you take the autism spectrum from mild to severe, as we start clearing up some of these causes, kids move down the spectrum from severe to moderate to mild to ADHD.
okay.
And so for me to hear that somebody has both ADHD and autism is crazy thinking. Of course they do. Because the severe end assumes everything at the mild end. And
Right.
as you get better and you move down toward the mild end, we're happy that all you have is for mild learning problems or ADHD. And
Mhm.
then we start tweaking. Did we get everything? If the vision issues are remediated, are there some other things that we should look at?
Okay. Yeah, and that's why I love the fact that your podcast is the Autism Detective because you're really looking at what are all of the causes?
Yep,
What is contributing to this behavior, or, in
right.
any form with those
Yep,
kids. Yeah,
yep,
awesome.
yep.
Um, do you want to talk a little bit about how nutrition is affecting vision in a
You
little more
know,
detail?
I- I'd love to. You know, one of the commonalities among all these kids is that they're picky eaters.
Mm,
And we learned that once we got on the internet in the 90s, where we found out that they all have the same diets. They live on macaroni and cheese and bagels and cream cheese and grilled cheese sandwiches and chicken nuggets and French fries.
Yeah.
And you think, did all these kids collude with each other and say, this is our diet? No. What do those diets have in common? They're almost all wheat and dairy in combination.
Mhm.
And this it's remarkable. And those are comfort foods. And the casein in the wheat, and the casein in the dairy and the gluten in the wheat combine to make an opiate.
Oh,
And when you
yeah,
think about that, it's an opiate is an addiction.
sure.
These kids are addicted to these foods. They don't just like them, they need them, just like an addict needs his drug.
Mm,
And we've learned that if we can substitute non casein containing products and non gluten containing products for cow's milk products and wheat containing breads and cookies and crackers, we get a much better behavior and sometimes an improvement in visual skills. And that if you take away even some of the substitutes, which are high carb and empty calories, and can get in some real foods instead of processed foods like fruits and vegetables and
mhm.
good quality protein, that all of a sudden these kids have more energy and they're sleeping better and they're better focused, and it's quite remarkable. And the eye is the most demanding part of the body nutritionally.
Mhm.
And so eye doctors are often the first person to say to somebody, you're sick. Eye doctors pick up diabetes. Eye doctors pick up small strokes. Eye
Mhm.
doctors pick up lack of nutrition because in a nutritionally bereft person, the eyes don't function so well. So when you add good nutrition, guess what? The vision is better. And and so we had a wonderful nutritionist, Kelly Dorfman, who's the author of Cure Your Child with Food, as part of my founding team of developmental delay resources. And she's still one of the smartest people I know in the area of nutrition.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love it. I always try to work on nutrition for myself and for my family.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's
mm.
getting harder and harder in some ways because our schools don't know what's good nutrition is. We're giving kids goldfish crackers, which don't qualify as food for me.
Right.
And and in some ways it's getting easier because thank goodness we have labels on food now. And it tells us what nasty things are in there. So we know that we're more likely to be well nourished if we eat real food and not what comes in boxes and packages.
Right, for sure. And then I always like to try and grow my own, 'cause
Oh,
then it's
yes.
even more
That's the
there's more
best.
control.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have a favorite story of, someone who applied all of these things and was able to overcome their Asperger's that maybe you could share?
Asperger's, you're talking about a
Or
little.
or Asperger's or even something more extreme than that, wherever on the autism your favorite story is, I guess, is what I'm asking for.
Well, one of my favorite stories is about a child who was having trouble in paying attention in kindergarten, and she this was years and years ago, and she was considered mildly autistic,
Mhm.
and her classroom was in the basement of a church. And I went to visit her in the classroom. And the first thing that hit me was that it smelled moldy to me.
Mm,
And mold is one of the most ubiquitous problems in our environment. And you can have a leak, a roof leak that you're not aware of, where it's what room it's affecting, or a room like the basement that's below ground.
mhm,
And these mold spores look for warm places, and the warmest place is in our lungs. And so when you breathe in mold spores and they hatch, they affect every aspect of your body, from your vision to your breathing to your sleep to everything. And this very autistic looking child, um, when we moved her classroom to a different kindergarten that wasn't in the basement, and we remediated we detoxified the mold in her body, she was no longer autistic. Now, she was an easy case because she was young and it was mold, period.
mhm. Wow.
But we could have gone off on a million different tangents with her and tried to behaviorally modify her and send her off to vision therapy and and put her in a special education class because she wasn't learning, and called her learning disabled. And the root cause was mold.
Mhm,
And I urge anybody who has any suspicion of a leak in their house from the roof, from the refrigerator, from a faucet, to have that looked at, and if necessary, tear out the wall
mhm.
and look behind it, because many of our kids are having difficulties with mold. The other one, a child who was living on wheat and dairy products.
Mhm.
And what a remarkable difference it made when we got to an elimination diet. And and parents are often afraid that their kids are going to starve because they're living on these foods only. And the kids are pretty stubborn, and they're so addicted that when you introduce Brussels sprouts and broccoli, they're not very enthusiastic.
Right.
And again, Kelly is a genius at looking at how you do it. How do you transition from macaroni and cheese and pizza to Brussels sprouts and broccoli? And
Mhm.
sometimes it has to be gradual, and sometimes it's you, the parent, that has to change your behavior. Shame on you for buying goldfish crackers. You know,
Right.
you tell the child they were out of them, or you're not buying those anymore, that some crazy lady told you they were poison, and I don't want to poison you.
And
And
you'll be that
so
crazy lady, right?
right. I read this book by a crazy lady. Yeah. So it takes both a change in a parent's behavior
Mhm.
and a change in to get a change in the child's behavior.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many stories out there, Denise. Epidemic Answers, the organization that I rolled into, has a lot of success stories, healing stories.
Mm,
Unfortunately, they're not all as simple as the one two I just told you, because we have to peel the onion
yeah.
and find out, what are all the factors that we're dealing with, and prioritize them properly. One of the biggest mistakes that people do is they do vision therapy too early, too
Mm,
soon, in a
okay.
sick body. And if that body hasn't gotten enough sleep, if it's malnourished, if
Mm,
if it's allergic to something it's breathing, if it's living in a moldy house, You can do vision therapy till the cows come home without success.
Right. I think that is such great advice.
Thank
And
you.
and we talk about vision therapy, most of the time on my podcast because
Uh-huh.
that's how I got my final result, right?
Yep.
But I think that often we don't take into consideration all the other things that happen along the way as you're trying to improve. I improved my diet. I looked at, maybe I should meditate more, maybe I should relax more, maybe my eyes need to relax more, maybe I need to
Right.
sleep better, all of those things um, got incorporated into it because I was frustrated, because it wasn't working, And it's like, okay, it didn't work until I got all of the pieces in place. And
Yeah.
maybe I could have gotten them in place better or easier if I had done them in a different order, you know?
Right.
And so I love the idea that we can just evaluate more better, prioritize better
Yep.
as we're looking at what the solutions could be.
And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because it's divided into 5 parts. From what is your lifestyle? Even before we start introducing expensive therapies, we
Mm-hmm.
want to look at how much sleep is a child getting? Is he a mouth breather? Is he having sleep apnea incidents? If
Mm-hmm.
he's not getting good quality sleep, everything else you're going to do is useless.
Yeah.
You're going to get, a smidgen of success, but he's got to sleep. And if he's not eating decently, you're wasting your time and money until you can improve his diet, which will help improve his sleep. And you can just get big bangs for your buck out of those 2 areas, um, before you start doing any kinds of therapies in the school, privately, or wherever.
Right. Well, yeah, and I also think it's important to suggest more time outside, you know.
That's right in the lifestyle chapter. You
Yeah.
know, barefoot outside in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. And our kids don't get sun. They don't, and their vitamin D levels are low, and they don't move.
Right.
We even from babyhood, we push them in a stroller, we put them in a backpack, we carry them around in buckets. They need to move.
Exactly.
That's that's the foundation for vision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been
You're
fascinating today.
you're doing such a great service. You really are.
Well,
And,
thanks.
sometimes it takes a personal experience like yours to wake people up, to what's going on. And vision is one of the biggest missing pieces
Mm-hmm.
of all of our children's development. It's not understood. It's confused with eyesight. Even our vision screenings in schools aren't really vision screenings, they're eyesight screenings. They rarely look at what's happening at reading distance. We know they can see the chart because they can find the bird's nest in the tree,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to be able to focus it near to be able to read, and they have to be able to accommodate different distances from the teacher to the blackboard to the computer. And they
Right.
spend so much time on the computers, which is not social distance, it's not reading distance, it's yet another distance.
Right.
And so they have to have that flexibility to be able to focus at all those distances and have a change of focus instantly at those different distances. So
Yeah.
it's complicated, and thank goodness you're doing the education that's needed to help people understand it.
Well, I hope so. I think that if more people were listening, then that would be happening.
I hope that people will listen to the Autism Detectives podcast. I have over 100 episodes now archived on Spotify, and people can listen to some of these parent stories.
Nice.
Some of them are so complicated, which is why I I couldn't come up with them instantly. But some of them are real success stories of kids who are in college now, who I knew when they were 3 years old, kids who weren't talking, who are now communicating on a letter board. That's a whole other thing that's going on now, the revolution in nonverbal autism using letter boards, and how optometrist Susan Daniel is working on the visual components of being able to even point at a single letter to spell. I just
Okay.
interviewed her. Hers hasn't even run yet. So there's just so many different components to these success stories, and how vision therapy can be successful for a foundation at a young age, and then you have to return to it say in adolescence, say in at an older age, even young adulthood, when the visual demands are are stronger,
Right.
and you have to be a good visual thinker. You have to organize your life to be successful and responsible.
Right. Yeah. It's not a one and done deal, right?
It's not. It certainly isn't.
Well,
So thank you for letting me rant and tell about my experiences. This has been a 50-year plus odyssey. I feel so fortunate to have had the career that I've had. I just felt like I was born at the right time to be there and able to contribute to the law in the 70s, and now see the success of what we did, what we put into place, and how people are benefiting from it, and
yeah.
what today's impediments are, and and also what today's artificial intelligence and technology allows, that you can use some software to write a letter to somebody using a robot. Is quite amazing.
It definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just have a whole different world for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're all just working to navigate it the way we need to here. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you
thank you.
so much for sharing all that today.
You're welcome, and I just hope it helps some families get on the right track. I'm available if they want to email me. My email address is developdelay@gmail, uh, DEVELOP, delay, DELAY, all one word, @gmail.com. And I have two websites. I have Patricia Lemer, LEMER.com, and I have my book has its own website, outsmartingautism.com. And so there's lots and lots of interviews like this.
Mhm.
There's lots of presentations and talks that I've given, and short, long, whatever anybody wants to listen to. And if they get the book, which is available on Amazon and other places, I'm happy to answer questions.
Awesome. And if they want to listen to the podcast, it's right now just on Spotify, right?
Right.
Okay. Hopefully
Yeah.
it'll be listed on other things soon,
I'm
but
working on it. The technology is really tough, and I appreciate your giving me some suggestions on how to get it out there in more places.
yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah, but on Spotify, the Autism Detective
Right.
can find you there. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Healing Our Sight podcast. I'd love to hear from you. Please share And also join our Facebook community at Healing Our Sight to leave suggestions or comments. Have a great day.